future option for people to watch later on if they were not able to join us. So once again, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time and ability to be here. Sounds like we might have a little feedback. There we go. Okay. So just a little bit of, I know we've been doing this all for about a year and a half, but just a reminder on a virtual meeting etiquette. Please mute your microphones when you're not talking. Use the hand raise to indicate you'd like to ask a question. And for those of you that are not or have not used Microsoft Teams, up at the top bar at the very top of your screen, there should be a smiley face person with a hand like this. If you just click that icon, we'll know that you are raising your hand. The other option is the chat feature, so the bubble speak. If you'd like to open that and type in a question or comment, or if you're having issues, please feel free to use that comment button. Again, we are recording this and we'll make it available to you in the future, as well as put it on our website for resources later. So hopefully you are in the right place for the session on preparing and implementing a capital improvement plan. And I will be your tour guide for the morning, introducing our speakers, Brad Harris, Gerald Herman, and Michael Walters-Young. But first, I'm just going to run through the agenda so you know what our goal is today. I'm going to introduce GNRC, who we are if you're unfamiliar. I'm going to hand it over to Brad Harris to discuss kind of a 101 basics of capital improvement planning. And then we'll jump into our panel discussion with Gerald Herman and Michael Walter-Young on their experiences with capital improvement planning and how they do their process. And then we'll take questions and close it out and let you get on with your Friday morning. I will say that we will pause between the presentations to give time for you to ask Brad questions, because he will need to leave us to go to a community to help them today. So we will pause once he is done with his presentation for questions. Just want to first thank USDA. Their partnership with us on a grant has made this training possible, and some of our communities have benefited from their generous support and grant offerings. So we just want to recognize them for all that they do to help our communities. So the Greater Nashville Regional Council, we are one of 9 in the state of Tennessee. We were formed in the 60s to serve 2 primary roles, one being a connection between state and federal partnerships and making sure that there's alignment between priorities and funding and helping to channel that funding to our communities, but also recognizing that challenges, opportunities are often not in alignment with political or jurisdictional boundaries. So being the connector between communities and amongst partnerships and stakeholders so that we can all find solutions to some of these challenging problems that we're facing today and in the future that we know will happen, and working with you and just making our region the best it can be and continue to be a desirable place for people to come and businesses. We have 3 primary buckets of work: aging and disability programs. A lot of you might know them from Meals for Wheels, senior services support. I am in the community and regional planning, doing the MPO, the transportation planning, community planning. A lot of our on-call community planners are in your communities. And then the economic and community development group working with home repair grants, but also the economic development strategy for the region. And then cross-cutting through our departments, we have data and research analytics. They do phenomenal work. If you've never worked with them or gotten any of their data, please reach out. Max and his team are very helpful and have a wealth of information that we use and I know communities use. And then policy and government affairs, looking at best practices and policy recommendations to implement some of our ideas and solutions. So it's Friday morning. I want to make sure you're all with me. So please grab your cell phone and text mskipper 999 to the number 22333. This will help. I just want to see who's in the room with us and get some information so that we can help make sure that our presentation is tailored to you and our audience. So again, text mskipper 999 to the number 22333. All right, and the poll is now open. So tell us your name and organization. All right, it's looking like we got some good representation. Dixon County, Hartsville, Trousdale, Clarksville, Mount Juliet, White House, Williamson County. Welcome, everybody. All right. I know there's more in the room, but we might still be getting used to the poll everywhere. So I'm going to move to the next one just to keep us on time. So tell us what your role or your department is at your organization. Are you an elected official, an appointed official? Do you work in the finance office, the administrative office, the planning department like me, public works, or other? All right, finance. Not too surprising with the topic today. All right, well, looks like we've got a good representation except for those planners. All right, I'm going to move us on. And just to give an idea, so that we're tailoring this to beginners, but what is your experience with capital improvement planning? Are you a beginner, an intermediate, advanced, or are you just in the wrong meeting? All right, so we've got a lot of intermediate folks here, so that's great. And some beginners, welcome. I'm sure you're going to hear a lot of really helpful information from Brad and Gerald and Michael in a moment. All right, I'm going to move us along into the basics of capital improvement planning. So I'm going to introduce our speaker, Brad Harris from the UTM Task Group. Brad is a finance and accounting consultant with the University of Tennessee's Municipal Technical Advisory Service. He has served as a member of the GFOA Budget and Fiscal Policy Committee, as well as on the board of several not-for-profit entities. He currently serves as the Vice President of the Tennessee Government Finance Officers Association and will assume the president's role on January 1st. So, Brad, I will hand it over to you, and thank you so much, and look forward to your presentations. I will relinquish control, and you may start. And Brad, you are on mute, doing a great job of muting while you are not speaking. Thank you.
Is that better?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Can you see my PowerPoint now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So let's get it going here from beginning. Now, can you see that okay?
You are good to go.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Jessica, for allowing me to be here. And it's great to, well, I can't say see everyone, be with everyone. How's that? And it looks like we have a real diverse audience from a lot of different agencies, a lot of cities. Those city folks will be familiar with MTAS, and you probably worked for years with Ralph Cross. I used to tell Ralph that they hired me because they needed some better looking people than him to work with MTAS, but I don't know how he thought about that. But Ralph's retired, and we have a couple of new folks on board now. And I work probably with about, it's hard to say, maybe 100 cities across the state. And this topic of capital improvement planning is a real interesting one. I will tell you that cities, I see some cities that are very proactive and well managed and financially sound. And all three of those kind of go in the same bucket, if you will. But also the ones that think forward with respect to capital improvements, planning ahead. Those are the cities primarily that are in good financial condition and doing things the way they should and not always grasping for money and trying to figure out how to get this done or get that done because they're thinking ahead. Now think about it for a moment. You and I do the same thing in our own personal lives. We do capital planning all the time. We buy a vehicle and we know at some point in time that vehicle is going to finish its estimated or its actual useful life, and we're going to have to buy another one. And so it would be much wiser for us to think, okay, I've got to buy a car in 5 years. What am I going to do about that now? How am I going to plan for that now so that when the time comes to buy a new vehicle, how am I going to pay for it? We could say that with college education or a new home. So this is not a topic that's completely foreign to us, but let's think about it more on a local government level. My slides, as Jessica mentioned, are pretty basic. Some of you may think this is silly. I learned this years ago. Others, it might be a novel idea to you, and that's okay. But I love this quote by Kate Asher. Rarely does a resident of any of the world's areas pause to consider the myriad of systems that operate around the clock to support it. Even the most mundane tasks would be impossible without the far-reaching, complex, and often invisible network of infrastructure that supports them. In my own little town, right outside my house, this week I had a major water leak in the street, and for 2 days we had no water. But as long as I can turn the spout on and have water, I don't even think about things like that. But I promise you, for 2 days this week, I did think about that. So let's talk about what goes into a good capital plan and what a city or a county. This originally was given to a city, but it could apply to any organization as well. We exist to provide, obviously, services to our citizens, including things like public safety, which would include police and fire. Go buy a fire truck now and see what that costs you, upwards of $1 million for a ladder truck now. So for ease of business, that would mean infrastructure, good roads, good streets, good schools, good business opportunity. That's what brings business into your town. And quality of life, things like parks and trails and all. These are all things that most cities think about and have to plan for. And to do all these things, obviously, we have to have assets to do them. So, uh, broadly defined, an asset is something that provides economic benefit, really, or is useful to a city or county, a person, and specifically something that provides economic benefit going forward of more than 1 year. You'll see that in another slide. Assets can be tangible or intangible. Tangible meaning things we can touch and see and feel, buildings, vehicles, roads, bridges, pipelines, equipment. It's easy to go on TDOT's website and find a list of things that need to be done right now in the state, there's a large percentage of bridges across Tennessee that are in ill repair. Many roads need to be worked on and fixed. And these are things that when you buy them, you know at some point they're going to fail and have to be replaced. Intangible assets, things we cannot see, like easements and leaseholds. All assets are not physical. So within a city, I've already mentioned your city buildings, your city hall. I've seen some of the most horrid city halls you can imagine: mold, mildew, water leaks from the top and the bottom, and buildings that I would not want to work in. And I've seen cities that do not even have a city hall. I've gone to somebody's kitchen and worked on their books. And some of these things are necessary, obviously. Some are maybe not necessary, but desirable, like parks and recreation. Each local government has to decide on their own what they want to provide their citizens and what their citizens want from them. And that might include parks and recreation. Places like Franklin, I know Michael's talking soon, they have nice parks and walking trails and sidewalks, beautiful ways for their citizens to get out and exercise and spend a good evening. Most local governments provide police and some type of fire service, obviously, and on down the line, public works, utilities. So capital assets, again, are those assets that are used in the operations and they have an estimated useful life beyond 1 year or exceeding 1 year. And they exceed, from an accounting standpoint, an established capitalization threshold. Local governments must establish a threshold, be it $5,000, $10,000, $25,000, and things that we buy that cost that much or more become part of our capital asset list. We would call it inventory. Some call it inventory, and this capital asset listing is very, very important. So some guidelines from the Tennessee Water and Wastewater Financing Board for useful lives. Now these are just estimates, but for most places, buildings are going to last 30 to 50 years. Of course, we see some. I was in a city hall yesterday that was built in 1848. It's the oldest standing depot in the state. Now, obviously, it's had some repair and been kept up over time, and they've had grants to do all that, National Historical Registry and all that. But so it's lasted much more than its estimated useful life. And you can see the list. Usually, vehicles and fixtures, computers, etc., a smaller useful life, and we have to think about how to replace them on an ongoing basis. I'll tell you that where I used to work at the City of Athens, I was the financial director for 5 years. Each department head was annually had to submit a capital improvement plan over a 10-year period. Some cities use 5, some use 3. We used 10 years, and our responsibility was to present to the city manager a list of capital improvements that we felt like needed to be done annually. And it could be next year, it could be 2, 3, it could be all the way up to 10 years. I always put a new roof on City Hall in the 10-year category. Never got approved, but I always put it on there. I put computers on a 4-year rotation. And each other department head did that. And that was all presented to the city manager. We'll talk a little bit later about what happened to it from that point forward. Again, sometimes you can see assets that a local government has, sometimes not so visible until it starts coming out of the road, like my water did this week. So assets are obviously impacted by normal wear and tear. They're impacted by weather, climate, accidents, or abuse or vandalism. I was at a city hall last year where a citizen pulled up to the front, small building, and instead of hitting the brake, they hit the gas and went right through the front of the building. And so things like that are rare, but they do happen. And just age. Assets are impacted by age. And so as a decision maker in your local government, we have to take care of citizens' property. I always tell, in most classes I teach, I somehow fit in the following. I'll say to the participants, you have to remember whose money we're spending and whose assets we're taking care of. They don't belong to me. They don't belong to you. They belong to our citizens, i.e. our taxpayers. And so we have a fiduciary or a stewardship role to take care of what belongs to someone else, to do our very best to make sure that it lasts as long as it can. Obviously, one great thing is to estimate a useful life over 10 years, but then actually to see it last for longer than that, 10, 15, 20 years maybe. That's a good thing. So we have to care for property that really belongs to someone else. This is a good sentence. Long life generally means economy. The longer we can use an asset without the cost of it overcoming the cost of a new one, then the better off we'll be. And when the repairs become more expensive than the purchase of a new vehicle, then we've got a problem. But oftentimes we can use them beyond their useful life. So asset management is the process of maintaining assets properly, making sure that we service our vehicles well and keep good roofs on our building and repair leaks in our water system, etc., and to be able to judge the current condition of those assets and to determine when replacement is necessary and budget for that expense. These things have to be budgeted. That's an interesting point. A capital improvement plan or budget may be a multi-year thing, but the next year of the capital improvement plan is part of the city or county's operating budget, only the next year. If you do a one-year budget, and almost all cities and counties do, but things that you have year two forward are not part of next year's capital improvement. I'm sorry, part of next year's budget, but they will be the following year. And we all know too that capital improvement plans are static. They change from time to time. We may have a vehicle on a replacement list for 2 years, and then 2 years from now we see that, hey, that vehicle's still doing a good job. It's not costing us a lot in repairs, so let's move it out 2 more years. So these things change from time to time. So a good plan, capital improvement plan, is an approach to make decisions on the care and the repair and the replacement of items that are owned by a local government, and it provides the opportunity for the best return on money spent. And I've said that already in certain ways, especially when assets can go beyond their estimated useful life. You might have a situation where an asset does not live up to its estimated useful life. It could be for various reasons. We could have overstated the useful life, or we could have something like an accident. A vehicle was wrecked, or a road washed out, or something like that has to be taken care of. So this is from a state website that I found. Asset management can be defined simply as understanding what and where your current utility assets are. This came from a utility board thing, but it could apply to all assets, not just utility. Ensuring a high level of customer service by actively operating, maintaining, and repairing current assets. That's good. And working to identify and prepare for future service needs and potential, listen to this, critical asset failure. So not only are we just understanding what we have, you need to know what your capital asset inventory list looks like. I work in cities sometimes that do not know that because their auditors maintain that list for them. But you need to know. If you do not know what's on that list, you need to get a copy of it from someone, be it your finance director, your auditor, and for a number of reasons. There may be things on that list that you don't have anymore. If you've got a Commodore 64 computer on your asset list, you probably don't have it any longer, okay? And you may be paying insurance on that if you turn that into your insurance company. So you have to maintain a good, accurate inventory capital asset listing with only the things that you have now. You have to add the new things you buy, and you have to get rid or delete the things that you have gotten rid of in your city. So good management means understanding what you have, and I know that sounds silly, but it's very, very important, and also keeping them up to shape and in good condition, repairing them as necessary. So a good plan consists of a good inventory list, And I always recommend to finance folks, the asset list needs to be also in the hands of department heads. If I'm the finance director at White House, I can't tell you every asset the fire department has or the street department, but their department head can do a much better job at that. So as a finance director for the city of Athens, every year I gave my department heads their asset list and said, I need to know, is this accurate? Have you gotten rid of any of these things? Have you added any things? That helped me to keep a good and accurate list. Also, your department heads know more about the condition of the assets that you have, much more than you do sitting behind a desk in the finance department. And also, department heads and your employees know what are the critical assets of the department. What are the most important things you have? What shuts the department down or hinders it tremendously if that particular asset goes down? And what assets are not as important if something happens to fail? So just an example of what might go on an asset listing, obviously the name and serial number, the location. The location, where's it located at? When's the last time someone saw that? I find that most local governments used to use asset tags with numbers, but I find a lot of them don't do that anymore. So being able to locate assets, it seems you feel kind of silly if your auditor's standing there saying, show me this truck, and you can't find it, okay? And I've seen that happen. But the list could also include the model number, when you bought it, how much you paid for that, and what the estimated useful life is, the condition, any other information that you might find beneficial. And you need maintenance records on file to help you understand when things might need to be replaced. So someone, and I would think your department level employees, your department heads, need to evaluate on a regular basis. Now you have to be careful sometimes, because what a department head feels like is a need may not be what you or the governing body feels like is a need. Sometimes police cars can be used beyond what the police chief thinks they can be used for. People want new stuff all the time, right? And that might be a legitimate need, or maybe not so much. So more than one set of eyes needs to say, yes, this is a need versus this is a want. It could be done by staff, or sometimes you might have to hire an outside professional to say, this needs to be done, or this does not need to be done. I have a city right now that has terrible roads, and I mean really bad roads, and it's because they've neglected them for really 2 or 3 decades. Now they don't have the money to do the work to repair those, and they're trying to figure out, do they borrow $1 million because they really don't have the ability to pay it back, or what do they do to try to get these roads repaired, because they're really in bad shape. Instead of doing some work along the way, they neglected them, and now they've got a problem on their hands. Critical assets. What are the most critical assets that you have in your department, in your local government? This needs to be made by a group of knowledgeable people, and I've said this 3 or 4 times already, the employees in that department and the department head. And I have seen cities that used an outside party. In my city, I just told you, with the deplorable roads, they've had a group of engineers come in to try to help them assess what roads need to be fixed right now, what can wait a year, and what can wait another year, to try to prioritize what needs to be done. Another thing that we have to think about, what level of service is acceptable in a city? I mean, are we okay with potholes or sidewalks that buckle? I hope not. Are we okay with our lawns not being cared for properly, or dead grass all over them, or the stormwater? I know this seems kind of facetious, but really, what level of service or condition of assets are we willing to accept within our local government? How reliable do you want your drinking water to be? Do you want it to be clean? Everybody wants clean water when they turn on the tap, but they don't necessarily want to pay for the cost of keeping it that way. Will they accept overflows or backups? No, they won't accept that. What's an acceptable level of fire police service response time? My city that I mentioned with the deployable roads, one thing in their budget process this year they haggled over was eliminating the police department, just doing away with it completely, and having the county service the city limits, which can be done, but then your response times go down. The county police, the sheriff doesn't have to keep an officer in the city; they simply have to respond to calls. So these are things you have to think about. Do we want to accept the cost of a police or fire department? Um, is it acceptable to have vehicles out of service? Well, no. If your house is on fire, you want a truck that starts, right, to come to your house to put out the fire. Um, so I know many of these things seem silly to us, but you'd be amazed what you see when you're working with a lot of different cities, and some of these things play out. All of these things I put on here, I've seen these things happen. How secure is your electronic infrastructure? When I went to work for the city of Athens, we were on what's called an AS400. That's an IBM system, very expensive. The hard drive on that thing was $100,000. It was on a $3 Walmart power strip, okay? And that's not very secure. So soon we purchased battery backups and all that, spent a lot of money on all that, but it's because we had a $100,000 system that ran our entire city computer system, and it needed to be protected. So the purpose of a good capital improvement plan is to identify projects and identify and forecast funding sources. Not only do we have to talk about what we need, but how are we going to pay for that? And to prioritize improvements based on funding availability and estimate a timeline for completion of these improvements. We can do this over 5 years. We can go out further. The further out you go, probably the less accurate it's going to be. 5, you're going to be pretty accurate, but beyond that, maybe not so much. But again, look at what's in bold. Identify what we need to do, how we're going to pay for it. We're going to pay for it out of pocket, or we're going to have to borrow money to do it. Prioritize these based on what we can afford and what we're able to do. So an example of some different types of capital improvements: pavement management. Every local government faces that. Vehicle replacement, office equipment, software, computers, etc. Water meter change out. These things don't last forever. This list could be very, very long, obviously. Just wanted to give you 3 or 4 that are very common that we have to think about all the time. Now, who should be involved in preparing a capital improvement plan? And the best answer is everyone. Everyone. I've talked about this quite a bit already, but the people in your local government that know the most about the condition of their assets are the employees and the department heads in that department. I don't know, sitting at my desk in finance, what they need necessarily, but finance plays a role because we have to be able to tell them what we can afford, what we can pay for. Do we have existing cash or that we can use, or are we going to have to borrow money? What's that going to look like if we do? And it plays a very important role in that. Our citizens need to be involved. Again, these are the people that we work for. And so everything that we use and pay for, they own. So they need to have a role in this. And then obviously the governing body, because they are the ultimate decision makers. They're the ones that will decide what really gets done, because they're the ones that pass the annual operating budget. Back to my city of Athens, I told you about. We prepared a capital improvement plan every year. It was for 10 years. The city manager took that, compiled it into one document, and at the annual retreat that the governing body did, this was part of their agenda. They would then go through the capital improvement plan and decide which projects they felt like were most important and should be funded in the upcoming budget year. And usually that's the way it worked. But they have the ultimate responsibility, the governing body. So for department heads, here's some things that they need to think about. What's the general appearance of the assets we have? What's the operational condition? What are the most critical things that they have in their department? What are the single point of failure assets, and are they reliable? How easily could things go down? And if that happens, what are the consequences? What are the short-term and long-term maintenance needs? We have to think both short-term and long-term. Do we have resources to meet the level of service that's expected from us? Do our staff have the skills and the training and the resources to perform maintenance? Some local governments have a centralized maintenance garage. Others have to pay every time they have something repaired. And do we have a capital budget in our department? The answer should be yes for each department in your local government. So, critical decisions. What needs to be replaced? We have to prioritize the most critical needs that we have. When do they need to be replaced? 5, 10 years. Let's do that. And has this plan been updated regularly? I can do a 10-year plan, but if you come back and look at it 6 years from now and it hasn't changed, it's probably not going to be very accurate, right? So we have to update the plan regularly. And then how are we going to pay for our capital replacement? Pay as you go? Are we going to try to pay cash for this going forward? If we're buying $1 million Quint or ladder truck, $1 million, are we going to pay for that out of pocket? Or are we going to try, that would be pay as you go? Pay as you use would mean, are we going to try to pay for it over its estimated useful life? If that truck is going to last 30 years, are we going to finance it over 30 years? So we're paying for it as we use it. So the answer may be pay as you go for some governments. It might be pay as you use for others. But these are decisions that have to be made. Now, I've got about, 2 minutes. Great. I'm going to give you some really good resources here. And Jessica can make this PowerPoint available to each of you. But we have some good material on the MTAS website about developing a capital budget. Also, ICMA has some good things. GFOA has a number of best practices on capital asset management. So any of these links will provide you a good resource for digging a little deeper, thinking about what you can do for a capital improvement plan. And last slide, thank you for letting me be here today. And there's my email address, my phone number. If there's anything that I can do to assist you in any way, please feel free to reach out to me. I'll help you any way I can, anytime that I'm able to do so. And with that, Jessica, I'll yield back to you.
Thank you so much, Brad. I'm gonna Brad, I think I'm gonna mute you.
Okay.
All right, maybe that yep, seems like it fixed the feedback. All right. Thank you, Brad. That was an excellent presentation. Lots of really good information on the basics. And I'm sure there might be some questions in the audience. So if anybody would like to take a moment before Brad, again, he will be leaving us to go to a community later this morning. So if you have a question that you would like to get answered before he does, please either use the hand raise icon or put it in the chat box and I will read it out loud to the group so that he can respond. Again, just really appreciate all the wonderful thoughts and recommendations that you put forward. And I know that a pavement asset or pavement management plan is one of the critical pieces because oftentimes that gets that money often goes somewhere else and then you get calls about potholes. So all right, well, Brad, it looks like you're off the hook today. I'm not seeing any questions come in, so we will let you go. Really appreciate your time. Oh, wait, Clayton has a question. Clayton, if you want to go ahead and come off mute and ask the question, you please feel free to.
Brad, Clayton Bollinger, just because you said the term several times, it kept pricking my ears about, ladder trucks, how long they last and all this kind of stuff. I have a town that doesn't have a single building that I can think of that's over 2 stories, but I have a ladder truck and I'm not sure why. Is that something that you were spitting out as a point that you see a lot of that, maybe people are buying equipment they don't need. And, you know, why, you know, did you get into a lot of this stuff? Why did we buy this? What are we going to use it for? And is this an asset that's actually valuable to the city, or city per our size? Can you kind of see where I'm going with that? You know, of cities that buy assets or equipment that they don't need.
You know, I don't see a lot of that in most cases, especially with things like vehicles and such. But there could be a different reasons for that particular situation. It could be that somebody made an offer they couldn't refuse. It could even have been donated to the city from or county, whatever it is, from another local government who bought a new one. Sometimes I see assets obtained with grants, and people or governments sometimes don't understand that when you buy something from a grant, from that point forward, you're responsible for maintaining it, paying for its insurance and its upkeep and all. And that can be a problem sometimes. But by and large, I see where cities don't have enough money to buy what they need to do. But man, I can certainly see where a ladder truck on nothing over 2 stories, maybe not, but I'd like to see how that came about, how that purchase came about. I hope that kind of halfway answers that, just because that would be an interesting case.
Yes, sir. And you know, that I just became mayor a couple of months ago. Granted, my dad was the mayor of the town 30 years ago, but a lot of things have changed, and it's like one of those. I look back over, what the real estate side, the area size, how much it's grown, and this, that, and the other, and some of the expenditures that have been put out, and I'm like, did we really need to spend the money on that? And it disturbs me a little, particularly I'm retired from the Marine Corps, where we're like the Navy's poor stepchild. We get leftovers and we fight for everything we have, and frivolous things we don't get a lot of. So when I see things that I'm not sure how I'm going to use it, if I'm ever going to use it, I get concerned.
Well, I certainly understand that, and in that vein, let me mention this too, with respect to grant money. All this money that's floating around right now. I mean, there's a lot of grant money out there. Everybody here is familiar with the rescue plan money that's going on. I believe your city's going to get probably 635,000, I believe, where you all are. I think that's right. And so we need to be very prudent as to what we spend that money on, and so we're not in that shape. Oh, I got all this money given to me, I'll just go get this, and this now. But I would encourage all of you to take your time. You've got 3 or 4 years to spend this money, and use it very prudently, and try to, and to your point, Clayton, to benefit the most of your city and county and citizens that you possibly can with that money. Just because we can now buy a ladder truck doesn't mean we need a ladder truck, to your point.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time, sir.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions for Brad? All right. Well, thank you, Brad. We appreciate your time this morning. Very generous. I hope you have a great weekend.
You as well, and glad to help. And anybody needs me, you just let me know, okay?
Will do. And we'll pass out Brad's slides to all of you that joined us. We'll get those out in an email later.
Y'all have a good day. Bye.
Thank you,
All right. So moving on to our panel discussion, I'd like to introduce our next two speakers. But before I do that, just to get an idea of how satisfied are you with your jurisdiction's capital planning process as it currently stands? So another poll, pull out your cell phones and you can text mskipper 999 at 222 or 22333. Hopefully you still have that up on your phone, but just you can drop a little pin on the smiley face of I am really, really happy smiley face, or it could use a little bit of work. Just want to see what you think your process is now that Brad walked you through kind of the basics of what's included, what is an asset, what to be thinking about in terms of useful life, maintaining that piece of property. All right, so we've got a few in the middle of the road on how they feel on their capital planning process. Give you all a few more seconds to respond to see. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our two panelists. So I will start with Mr. Gerald Herman. He was appointed the Chief of Police of the White House Police Department in 2008, and he was promoted to the City Administrator in March of 2012. His responsibilities include managing the city budget, reporting to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, attending and participating in local and regional boards, and supervising 9 departments and over 100 full-time employees. And he comes to us, or grew up in Toledo, Ohio. So welcome, Gerald. And our other panelist is Mr. Michael Waters Young, and he is from the city of Franklin. And he is an award-winning city budget and finance expert, and he currently serves as a member of the city's finance team as the budget and strategic innovation manager. He also spearheads a statewide performance measurement collaborative, the Benchmarking Alliance of Tennessee for Tennessee municipalities. And he's active in many professional associations, including ICMA and TCMA, as well as GFOA, along with Brad. So now that it looks like we have a few more responses to our polling question, we've got one that's not so satisfied with their capital planning process, and a few more on the very, very happy, doing amazing. So with that, what we're going to do with the panel discussion is each panelist is going to talk about their process and what they do very briefly, a high level, and then we will jump into the panel discussion questions. So I will hand it over to Gerald, and I will move your slides along as you need them. So Gerald, if you want to unmute and talk about the city's process that you do now.
Okay, I think, Jessica, can you hear me okay?
You are good to go.
All right, great. I know I had some technical difficulties earlier. Clayton, hey, Semper Fi, buddy. Was in the Marine Corps too, and working with A6 planes that were hand-me-downs from the Navy. I know what you're talking about. We always got the hand-me-downs. So yeah, budgeting, taking what Brad had to say and how do we formulate that into some kind of practical use in a community. The city of White House is a small city, and it's about 14,000 people now in the city. So we're a AA+ city. We have pretty good finances. I think we're strong financially, and we do really well in managing our budget and managing our capital improvement projects. So after about 22 years of being a department head and city manager between police chief and city management, now almost 10 years, I certainly have seen a lot of different things. And the city I came to, that I came from, and I was a department head there 8 years. The way we did our budgeting was, as a police chief, I just sent to the finance director, city administrator, some requests without really any background information as to why. And then you hope that maybe they would fund it or maybe they wouldn't. And it was maybe, did you like the city manager, or did they get along with you really well, or did somebody else kiss up a little bit more and was able to get something that you weren't able to get? So coming to the city of White House in 2008, the very first thing I did, I had to go to budget retreat with the department heads. And I have to say, Angie Carey was the city manager at the time, and her and Gary Jaco from MTAS put together a pretty good program for the city in 2007. So I got to jump in on the second year of it. We've made some modifications to it over the years, but by and large, it's the same footprint that we've used, and it works really, really well for the city. And I have to say, it's a very fair process, and I like what we have to do. So starting out, we get a budget calendar approved by our board mayor and aldermen, usually around December, so that we can start our budgeting process in January. And I put that up there, and you can see on the slide, starts out with a CIP template, which includes a 6-year CIP, and that's what we use. And I'll show you at the very last slide what a 6-year CIP looks like and the funding sources that we have connected to it. But that's really where we start. And how do these department heads come up with these capital projects that they have? You know, I heard you asking about why did they come up with a ladder truck if it was something that was really needed or not. You know, we do citizen surveys with our citizens every couple, 2 or 3 years. We usually ask questions about our budget. You know, what do they see as priorities? Is a park project more prioritized over a road transportation project? Those type of things. And then we ask them, you know, do you want skate park? Do you want bike lanes, or do you want a new park? Do you want more ball fields? These type of things. It kind of helps us understand what the citizens are thinking that they want. Because I always say a city can have anything they want if they're willing to pay for it. And that's the hard part. Are they willing to pay for it? You know, do you want your trash collected at the curb, or do you want it collected up at your garage, inside your garage, where the sanitation person goes to your garage, hits the button for your garage door, raises it up, brings it out, and puts it back in, closes your garage door, and everything's fine. I knew a city that actually did that. So they had a pretty good funded city, and they liked that's how they wanted that personal service. But when you look at our budget calendar, we have a department head retreat in January, and that kind of kicks it off. We talk about new positions, that requests that they may have, and then our capital project request. And then it kind of goes through that process at this point. The budget retreat is really cool. We usually try to do it off-site if we can, and we do some team building with the team, exercises just for some playful activity and fun things to do, just to kind of get us communicating with each other. And then the next thing we do is we have each department head they give us a list of their capital projects one at a time, and there's a matrix system that they had to score their projects with prior to coming in. If we can go to that matrix, I'll show you a sample of one of our enterprise funds, the stormwater fund. And as you can see across the top, we have various categories that have to be scored with various points. And this is really important for us to try to figure out, you know, if this project is really important to that department or not. And the fun thing we like to do, and sometimes it can get really challenging, is like if you start out with the very top line, land acquisition mitigation, the department head goes ahead and fills out every one of those categories and what they score that as. But then we have them go over each category and explain to us why they think they scored it the way they did. And then there's challenges that are made. Some department heads will say, hey, listen, I don't think you really need to put money away for land acquisition, that type of thing. So I guess it can get kind of challenging, kind of get a little bit robust when you have a department head sitting there thinking, maybe I really don't have the answer for that. Or they get really challenging and say, wait a minute, I need this project. It's really important to us. So it really helps us guide us. And, you know, is the project been delayed for a number of years? That's important to us. Is it contractually or legally required? Like, do you have a grant that's funding that project? And if you have a grant that's funding that project, obviously it's very important. And then off to the left, you can see the little circles where we actually have the department head tell us, okay, what are your priorities? If you can't get funded for all of them, which one do you need to see first? And as you can see on that particular list off to the left, Wilkinson Watershed was #1 to that department. Springfield Subdivision was #2. And you can see how it kind of goes 3, 4, and 5. And you can see where we had crossed out a mark in the Springbrook Subdivision where there was a challenge on the years delayed. So the department had thought it was 1 year out delayed, and the rest of us argued against it, and so it was a 0, and so they had to reduce the number of points that they were going to score for that particular project. And then after the budget retreat, we put out a scoring thing, and this is a good example here of how we prioritized, because when we go to the later in March, we have a budget retreat with our board of mayor and aldermen. And at this retreat, we do some with the department heads. Again, we do some fun team building with the board, and then they get to look at every one of these categories they see under the general fund. For example, you see all these things listed. The general fund is the fund that gets attacked most because everybody wants their fingers in that kettle there to try to get money out of that general fund. So we have a lot of projects there. And then you see the red letters or the red numbers are our actual matrix scores, so that the board can see what was up there. And then you can see off to the right, I believe it is the blue numbers are the department head priorities, because we get these, each department head gets like 4 stickers, 4 or 5 stickers, depending on what year we're in. And then we go up and we look at everybody's project, and then we put a sticker if we think it's an important project. Now, the peer pressure side of it is, are you the person that department head that says, I'm going to take all my stickers and put them only on my projects and not give them to anybody else? But it helps. What I think this process does is it gives the department heads, each one of them, an opportunity to see what's going on in the other departments and what's really the most prioritized, what are the priorities for the entire city, not being selfish about your own department, but do you think that maybe something in the street department is more important than something that's going on in the fire department? So it's really, again, a really nice system. It allows the department heads to see things in a better format. And then as you can look at their how we prioritize it, and generally at the end we score what the staff priorities are. The BMA, the board, mayor, alderman, they also have stickers and they prioritize. Theirs are worth twice as much as the department heads. And then we came out with a total point with your CIP score. And that's what I look at when I get down to the final nitty gritty of the budget. I say, okay, this is how much revenue we have. This is how much how the expenditures are. Okay, then we start at the top of our list and we work our way down. And at a certain point, I have to cut it off if we don't have enough funds to do all the projects. And that's when I have to have a study session with the board, mayor, alderman to decide, all right, do we increase taxes this year or fees to be able to accommodate the revenue that we're going to need to pay for all these expenditures, or do we cut those projects? And I've had years where we've cut projects and significantly cut projects, and I've had years where we've raised taxes to accommodate all the projects, and we just did that in our past one. This is a 6-year CIP schedule that kind of shows you just a couple of departments: building, maintenance, engineering, finance, fire department. And at the bottom, the funding sources. Where's that money coming from? Is it coming from a bond? Is it coming from a grant? Is it coming from impact fees in the various categories? So I want you to see what that looks like. And then that's really, I think that kind of explains our process in a nutshell, and I'll turn it back over to Jessica.
Thanks, Gerald. Great walking through that step-by-step of what you all do at the city to identify and then prioritize and rank and create your capital improvement budget and plan. So I will now turn it over to Michael Young to introduce and talk about the process for planning and budgeting that the city of Franklin does.
Thank you, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. Pleasure to be with you this morning. I will attempt to share my screen. Let's see here. There we are. We have a very similar process to White House. I would say it's not quite as well developed, and I want to be Gerald when I grow up, because his is very regimented and very solid and done on an annual basis. We don't quite do that as frequently. So we do a 10-year CIP here in the city of Franklin. It's driven by a comprehensive review initiated by staff. So as Brad suggested, you let your subject matter experts really drive the ship. They know the projects that are needed, and that's what we do. We solicit input from all of our departments, from engineering, from parks, from stormwater, from water management, from fire, etc. And then we develop them and cull them. So it's project driven. We then give it over to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen to rank, and we revisit it every 2 to 2.5 years. So as I said, it's project driven, and in that regard, we do solicit ideas from our staff. Staff is the one responsible for developing the cost estimates, developing the scope, and ranking the projects. We rank them dependent upon our strategic plan, Franklin Forward, and I'll show you in a second how that looks. We then prepare that list, distribute it to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen for their ranking, and it's the board's ranking that is most important. So when we set aside time to do this exercise, we try to tie everything back in our operating budget and our capital budgets to our strategic plan. And our strategic plan has 4 main themes: a safe, clean, livable city, an effective and fiscally sound city government providing high quality services, quality life experiences, and then sustainable growth and economic prosperity. Our team then took those 4 basic tenets and developed a rubric and assigned points similar to what you saw in Gerald's exercise in his chart for each of those 4 categories. So does a project contribute to the health, safety, and welfare? And then, assign points. Does it eliminate a known hazard, a potential hazard? Does it materially contribute? Does it minimally contribute? Or is it just a pie in the sky ladder truck in a small city that has no tall buildings? That's where we would put the ladder truck, by the way. And on down the list. Project deferral, is there an impact, environmental impact, etc. So the other thing that we add in addition to that is a section on technical requirements. Is it ready to go? Keep in mind, I think we all back in the day when the last great federal stimulus, the ARA funds, the American Rescue and Recovery Plan in the Great Recession, the catchphrase at the time was shovel ready. That's still very important here in Middle Tennessee. Pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and post-pandemic, are your projects ready to go? Because it gives you the best chance to get available funding from state and federal sources, let alone tap into and get contracts let with your own resources. Does it meet a critical city objective? And is there a prior investment already in the city? So from that, we then give assigned spreadsheets to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. So we have our ranking here. We have an estimated cost, name of the project, what category it fits under, and there's only 4 or 5 categories really that cities and counties are going to end up doing. For counties, you're going to obviously have public schools or education, but for most of us, it's going to be parks and rec. Transportation would be roads, general services, stormwater, etc. And then we turn it over to each of the board members to then rank, and then they get a ranking. You'll note there's a green column here, and then there's a red column. Magically, that assigns and is the split of where the available resources really are. So we develop a financing model and give it to the board. Let's see, there we are. So we develop a financing model and we walk them through the existing resources that we have. So as of fiscal 18, and we are very, very close to actually developing and presenting the 22 through 31 financing model. That's why what I'm showing you is a few years old, because it's just not quite public ready yet. But we show the existing cash on hand from all of our funding sources. Then we project out 10 years in each of those funding sources. Now we have, in any given year, we've got between 10 and 12 funding sources, just like in White House. Gerald showed you his list. And you have to maximize and figure out, certain funding sources can only be used for certain things. We have a facilities tax. We can only spend that on police, fire, parks, and sanitation. Roads, we have a road impact fund. You can only use the arterial and collector road fees on, obviously, roads. So I can't spend road impact on parks and I can't spend facilities on roads, even though you'd really like to in many cases, because they are contribute to each other. We then do a revised debt capacity analysis because, quite honestly, when you're talking about capital investment and programming, debt is good. Debt allows you to leverage your dollars and really is the fairest way to finance large-scale capital projects, because those who use the resource end up paying for the resource if you borrow money for it. If you just pay in cash, and that's nothing wrong with that, but if you wait to buy a large ladder truck, or you wait to buy and build a capital investment with just cash, it is the people of yesterday who have paid for that resource and may or may not be around to actually use it. Whereas debt financing, the people that actually use it are the ones that are paying for it. We take a look at our debt curve, and then we come up with a composite analysis of how much money we have if we just had spent cash or if we borrow money. We try to make it half and half or a little less than half and half in terms of cash and debt. So our magic number was $150 million that we gave the board. And the reason was in 2019, we had already committed $90 million. And so 237 minus 90 is about 150. We were optimistic, we rounded up. So again, going back to this ranking sheet, you see that that cutoff was 150. The board obviously had a lot more projects to choose from. This total was 380 million, and many of them had projects that they wanted. Unfortunately, that Lewisburg Pike Trail just only got one vote and was way, way down that list, so we're just not going to do that project. After we do that, as you see, they fill their bucket. Staff is off to the races to build and finance the projects. And then we come back every 2 years. What we do every 2 years then, similar to what Brad suggested, is we produce an annual capital budget. And this was the budget for 2020. We did it by tier, we did it by project phase, we did it by investment area. This is by funding source. So the budget for the city of Franklin for 2020 was $41 million of investment into capital projects. And so we gave the total cost and then how much we anticipated to spend in a particular fiscal year. Again, you're tying your annual appropriation to an ongoing project, and then we try to achieve and get the projects done. What we've done this year, 2 years later, is to come back, and in the springtime, we had departments about once a month do updates, present the updates to the board, say, this project is done, this project is in progress, we ain't going to meet the timeline on this project, and just kind of keep them in the loop and keep them focused and reasonable. One of the things that we also do in the city of Franklin is we have a capital projects dashboard. We developed this in-house with our GIS department, and it allows individuals to then see where the numbers are here, click on an item, and you can not only see where it is in your community, but then who's the project manager responsible for it, what the estimated budget is, how much we've spent to date, when it was approved, when we believe it's going to be completed, and what phase it's in. Is it in design? Is it in right-of-way? Or is it in construction? One of the things we've learned here, quite honestly, in the city of Franklin is that it's vitally important to have as much communication as possible with your residents. It's funny. They really, really, really want the improvements, and they are generally happy to pay for them, but they hate the construction. They hate the disruption. They hate waiting for it. It never gets done fast enough in their eyes because it just takes a while. In order to do a road project, that's generally a 5-year commitment from thought to finish if it goes fast. And that's because of all of the permissions and all the permits you have to pull. It's coordinating the utility companies. It's buying the right of way. It's then, weather delays, contractor delays, certainly right now, material delays. So keeping them in the loop, keeping them advised, what's going on, what phase of the project we're in. Tools like this can help with that. Also engaging social media can help with that. And it's just something that we've learned is vitally important. So I am done with my piece. I will close and we'll enter the questions. There's my contact information. We'll certainly get this out to you. My final thing that I do in any presentation is simply to say thank you to all of you. When we woke up and said we want to go join government, none of us ever were prepped, prepared, or took a class on how do you manage through a pandemic. These really are unprecedented times. I know we're tired. I know we have a community that wants to have some degree of peace and some degree of stability. You provide the backbone and are there every day, and keep the faith, stay true, and we're going to get through this.
Great words of wisdom, Michael. Appreciate it. I think we all need that. So we're going to move into a panel discussion, and I appreciate you guys addressing many of the ones that we had already that we were thinking of discussing. So I have trimmed our list down. So I'm going to start, and I'll throw it to you, Michael, first. What is the most challenging aspect of the process? And then you can follow that with in the implementation as well.
I believe the most challenging aspect of the overall capital investment process is setting and meeting reasonable expectations. for project delivery, for cost estimates, and I would say internally what we find is trying to balance the expectations of the elected officials. They have their constituents in their ears, and they want it now. They want it all, and they want it now. We can't do that. We don't have the resources. We don't have the time. And like I said, capital projects take a while, especially if you do them right. And the worst thing in the world is to do a capital project wrong. So trying to keep the board's expectations reasonable, and then being able to try to deliver those projects. God bless our engineering folks and all of our project managers, because the pressures upon them are immense. Trying to do construction right now in anything, anywhere, where costs are skyrocketing, where 2x4s at one point in time this year were $40 a beam, trying to find steel, trying to, any sort of materials is just insane. And we already had a tight labor market in Middle Tennessee. So setting and meeting those reasonable expectations, in my opinion, is the most challenging aspect of both the capital planning process and trying to actually get the projects done. Gerald?
Yeah, Gerald. I mean, it's crazy. Labor, I mean, it's still happening. Labor, materials at least have gone down, but then you have inflation going. Yeah. So setting clear expectations is a good start. So yeah, Gerald, what is your most challenging aspect of the process you've experienced? And then also on the flip side, during the implementation?
Michael, great presentation. You gave me some pointers there. I'm going to take a look at your presentation when I get a chance and dig into the details of it. For me, what is the most challenging aspect of the process really is not the process itself. It's when I have to make that decision at the end, what projects may have to be cut from the capital improvement project list. That's very difficult for me, or to be able to ask the citizens, are you willing to increase your property taxes 2 cents, 5 cents, 10 cents, or in the last case we did a little over 20 cents. So because we went like 8 years without a property tax increase, and we were doing really good, but this last one we had to ask. So those are difficult questions. That's the difficult part for me there. Now the implementation side is, do you have cash funds on, in reserve that you have to have a cash flow to be able to pay for these capital projects. And, all my department heads would love to be able to, July, at the very first board meeting, to put every one of their capital projects before the council, say, approve all my projects right now. And I'm going to start every one of them as soon as I can by August. And you're like, do you have any fund balance to handle all that? And, and so that's, I think the implementation side is the hard part. So what we do is we do a capital detail sheet that each one of the department has to do on every one of their capital projects. And then they submit to us when they would like to start the project. And then I make the final decisions and when I think they should start the project in the year, because we can't start them all in July. So we spread them out September, October, November, December, January. And we don't want to get too late after January, February, because by then you're already starting to think about the next budget year. But that's how we spread it out to handle the implementation side. And fortunately enough, we keep 30% of our operating revenues. We try, that's our goal, in fund balance at all times, so that we have cash flow available to us. So thank you for that.
Oh, right. And I think you have answered the benefit, but I'm sure folks have questions. I'm going to jump right to the last question, so we have plenty of time for the audience to gain some words of wisdom or get some questions answered they may have. But having gone through multiple capital improvement planning cycles and updates, what are some words of wisdom that you would impart to our communities and staff or elected officials that are either considering or starting or are those intermediate stages of capital planning? What words of wisdom would you pass along other than just take a deep breath and go?
Well,
So
for
Gerald,
me,
yep.
Okay, yeah, for me, I think is involve everyone. I think Brad said that, involve everyone and create a plan. a process, because if you don't, your department heads are just going to throw things at you, and you're going to be like, oh, I don't know, I really don't understand it. And yeah, okay, we can fund it. I always say this, especially with wastewater. When a police chief comes up and says, I need 3 or 4 police cars, let's say, and everybody owns police cars, so the board has all kinds of questions. How many miles do you have on it? You know, is it good condition? Have you been maintaining it and all that? But a wastewater manager comes in and says, I need this certain widget, which none of us know what it is or understand, and it's only $1 million. I know the police chief only needs $80,000 or $90,000, but I need $1 million. And they're like, oh, he must really need it because we don't understand what that is. That's a challenge for us. So the words of wisdom is involve everyone and try to understand and develop a process that will work for you. Thank you.
You know, I give presentations throughout the state and nationally on all aspects of budgeting, and increasingly, I boil it down to setting reasonable expectations and KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. When you're and that's true for everything we do in municipal finance. You know, our jobs are to know, as administrators and as elected officials, your jobs are to know a little about a lot. Our jobs as subject matter experts are to be able to understand the minutia, but then boil it down so that everyone can understand it and make sure that they know what they need to know. And to that end, there's a lot of stuff we've shown you and thrown your way this morning about, you know, the process and about grids and about assigning rankings and weight rankings and yada yada yada. But at the end of the day, having a simple grid, start simple, list your projects, list an estimated cost, list when do you think they're going to be needed, get it down on paper. Once you do that, you have the workings of your capital plan. And then from there, you can grow the process somewhat naturally to best fit your organization. You know, Gerald and I have shown you 2 different ways of doing it, but there's multiple ways of doing it. You know your organizations and your communities best. Figure out what does work for you. It's definitely a challenge, as Brad and Gerald have said, to try to figure out what is the acceptable level of risk and what really is the need. Everyone of our staffs that we trust immensely, that are the subject matter experts, can make a compelling case for why they need something. It's your jobs at the end of the day to help influence either the policymakers, or if you are the policymaker, to have your administrator be able to tell you, this is all you can afford, and this is, you know, you then have to make that trade-off. But you want to make a data-driven trade-off. So keeping it as simple as possible is really the best thing you can do and to not overcomplicate it.
All right, words of wisdom. Thank you, Gerald, and thank you, Michael. And now I will open the floor up to our audience questions that I'm sure they have been sitting on and thinking about. So please, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or type it in the comment box. So just think of, we're waiting for you all to ask our questions. I will unshare my screen so we can see everybody. And it looks like Clayton has a question. Clayton, go ahead.
Hey, Gerald, you're close enough to me that your city that you understand some of the issues that I've been going through as the new mayor and some of the things we're rebuilding. You're probably very familiar with our police issue. Please get in touch with me, or let me get in touch with you, share some information, because we're basically in the same county geography area. You've got a lot of information that I need. And, you know, and there's a lot of things from White House that come into Ridgetop that, you know, y'all provide our water. You know, y'all provide a lot of other stuff. You know, we're literally butted up against each other. And if there's a problem that I'm going to have, you've probably already faced it. But particularly your experience in the police realm, I need, because we're trying to rebuild. I'm getting some great advice from Melvin Brown, which I'm sure you know because everybody knows Melvin Brown. But unfortunately, we're running out of a timeline of Melvin being able to continue helping me. So let's get in touch, please, and have a meeting, do something. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, just you can either reach out to my office. Jessica will probably give us a phone number, maybe some contact information, or send me an email. We'll set something up. All right. Thank you.
Yes, I will.
Thank
I'll
you,
be
sir.
sure that everybody gets a copy of the presentation and our speaker's contact information. So thank you, Clayton. All right, any other questions? This was a lot of information to digest on a Friday. I was blown away by both processes that the Franklin and White House do. I think they're unique in their own ways. And as Michael said, you really need to make it fit your community, what level of experience you're comfortable with, what level of information and just awareness that your elected officials or appointed officials want. Don't bury something in page 50 of a 150-page document. KISS always works. So any questions? I know we've only got about 5 more minutes here with you all. Don't lose this opportunity to ask questions, please. All right, we have a comment come in from Bill. Let me read it. So, how has White House and Franklin incorporated the CIP process into the comprehensive plan? And if so, does your comprehensive plan include a long-term capital improvements element? Gerald, Michael, who wants to take that one?
So, yes, but would be my response. We worked very hard here to redo our comprehensive plan called Envision Franklin several years ago. There is certainly a transportation element to that. We coordinate between that and certainly the MPO's transportation plan, and certainly getting on the state's tip to make sure that anything that we can get additional grant funding for is there. We just actually amended parts of those documents Tuesday night at our board meeting as certain aspects of the community develop. Obviously, you can draw a road on a map with all the best intentions, and then development occurs, reality hits you, and ironically, as the town has grown, we have abutted rural areas where the amount of roads that we thought we were going to put into place, we basically took out the eraser. And they did not want it. They did not want development. They control the land. And so, you work very intimately with some of those people who've been there for multiple generations. And the board was very much in favor of respecting their private property rights. So to that end, yes, there is that coordination with a comprehensive plan. But it also, the developer-driven piece of how we live is critical to where the roads go. So a lot of these capital projects, and those of us that live in growing communities will reach a point where we become more mature. And by that I mean, I spent 12 years in New England in the Boston suburbs, in cities that were completely built out by the end of World War I. There was no more land to develop. So then it's all redevelopment. So you're going to see our CIPs shift over the next several generations to go from building new roads and capacities to the rebuilding of facilities and those sorts of things. But for now, the developer-driven piece is vitally important. It funds projects because we have impact fees, or we have facilities taxes, or we have, adequate. I think the county calls it an adequate facilities tax that helps fund, pieces of education now, new school development. That money will go away as we finish building out. But for now, it's not just the fact that we get money from these developments, but the developers themselves are usually in charge of building the road, which means we may want a road to go like this. They want it to go like this. and you have to kind of work through that. I know in Williamson County, we want to build additional east-west connectors, and the ability to do that from the center part of the county, so Franklin, Brentwood to Nolensville, is rapidly diminishing and going away, because as more developments get built, the simple right-of-way is being gobbled up with subdivisions. So trying to stay ahead of that and to get those east-west connectors is certainly a challenge. Gerald?
Yeah, Michael, I think you covered that really well. I think the only thing I would really add, because obviously we have to have our long-term plan, and needs to fit with the region's long-term plan, and so I'm always looking at that. But in our matrix system, we have two primary questions I think that helps us in that regard, and one is the conformance with common goals or other projects. So that we want to know, is your project tied to any other department's projects in the city? How that works. And then the last one is the project consistency with the master plan. Is it already in your 6-year CIP plan? Is it something you've been working on? Does it tie to the master road plan? Like you got into roads there quite a bit. If you're planning on extending a road in the future, to create a new collector road, are you planning on the design side? Are you getting the environmental side done, the engineering side of it, and then finally into construction? So you need to be moving those projects forward in that. So I think, yeah, it has to tie to your comprehensive plan. I think that to negate that would be foolish on the part of the city.
Great question, Bill. And yes, Michael, you are correct. That is, when you think about transportation planning, as the MPO, we're looking out 25, 30 years, and those homes get built in less than a year, and that land is getting gobbled up, and you don't ever want to be that government that comes and say, we need to buy your house for a road. Not a good way to introduce yourselves to your constituents. All right. Well, I have time for one more question if somebody wants to ask it, if they've been sitting on it. Give you 1, 2, 3. All right. That's it. Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate your time this morning. Appreciate all the words of wisdom and talking about your process that you follow. I know that it sounds like you will be people will reach out to you with questions. So I will get some materials from you, Michael, so we can be sure to share that out in an email. Again, this was recorded, so the recording will be made available. And I guess let me pull up my little reminder screen to say that we have a session coming up next Friday on the 24th on Grants 101. Another good panel discussion with some folks from Mount Juliet and Gallatin. So hope you can join us talking about where you can find grant money, how best to tailor your projects to fit their needs, and also thinking about project development as you're taking it from a capital planning process and budgeting into a full development for consideration. So hope you all can join us. Really appreciate your time. Want to thank our speakers and panelists again. Thank you very much. Yes, please use the hand clapping. Gotta love the little emojis and icons that we can do now in our virtual world. But really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a wonderful Friday and a good weekend. And we will see you next time. Bye, everybody.